Problems at EA Battlefield Studios. The creator of the Yakuza games made a new studio, but unfortunately, it seems that they have lost their funding. And the next Xbox has been announced from Microsoft, but not a lot of details have come out, and it's most likely going to be a very expensive Xbox as well. That is what we're going to be talking about today. My name is the Techno Jelly. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We do these types of videos on Mondays, so come over here on Mondays. Comment down below what you are interested in so I know what to cover. And now let's get right into the video. Starting with the fact that EA has laid off a bunch of staff. Unfortunately, we don't know the exact numbers according to IGN, but we do know that it's across all of the Battlefield teams. So, Creatine, DICE, Ripple Effect, and Motive Studios. And while we don't know the exact numbers of the layoffs, all those studios work on Battlefield in some way. They all are involved in Battlefield, obviously DICE being the biggest one. And this is coming off of a really successful Battlefield 6 launch. While Battlefield 6 is now almost half a year old and had a very successful launch, in the last couple of months it has had some really rough patches, and it seemingly means that these rough patches mean layoffs, though I don't necessarily agree with EA when it comes to these layoffs, because it feels like some of these decisions are coming from the EA executives instead of DICE, because DICE made a really good Battlefield game in Battlefield 6. It was a really return to form in terms of a Battlefield. And while I personally didn't buy it, I did play the open betas. And during those open betas, I was firmly in the camp of Battlefield's back, but I am not a Battlefield player personally. And while for me personally, it was a cool move on moment, for a lot of people, it was a amazing time to get back into Battlefield. It sold 7 million copies in 3 days, which is a record for Battlefield in the whole franchise. And pretty much everyone gave the game like high praise when it first came out. And unfortunately, that's where the good news for Battlefield ends, because after the launch, a lot of bad things happened. First of all, it is now a mixed review on Steam, at least of time of recording, rather than mostly positive, which is what it started as, because of one, the Season 1 stuff was not as good as other people were hoping for. The honeymoon phase for Battlefield 6 did start to dwindle a little bit because of the map size. I do remember seeing people complain about the map size being a little small for Battlefield games, but these were nitpicky things, assuming that they were going to fix them in the roadmap, because the base layer of Battlefield 6 was great and everyone loved it. And it showed in the numbers with the sales and the player counts, even just on Steam itself, with peaking over 700,000 players on Steam. And this is not even including the console numbers, because those numbers are really hard to get by. And overall, with the smaller updates that their game was getting after launch, and then some of those updates seemingly using generative AI art, which is a big no-no for a lot of gamers, very weirdly heavy monetization when it comes to their version of the battle pass and the cosmetics, which is weird because this is not a free-to-play game. This is a fully priced game, and I understand that is kind of normalized nowadays, but that doesn't mean it's a good thing. And then with the actual content in the content updates, it was not as big. A map here or there, and things like that. With the delay of the Season 2 update, things got a little weird. And then when it finally came out in February, it was kind of just like a meh thing. It was kind of like, okay, that's kind of cool. And it feels like they're repeating the same mistakes, because Red Sect, their huge push, is just a battle royale coming out in 2026, which felt very out of place. And let's just be honest here, Battlefield doesn't really do battle royale very well, even though I think they could. It just doesn't feel right, and they should have just been focusing on the Battlefield 6 themselves. I don't know why they had this separate game mode. They're trying to be Call of Duty again with Warzone, and it makes no sense. With Red Sect being at mostly negative for basically its entire life, and it really sucks, because it's not necessarily the Battlefield devs' fault that some of this stuff is happening, because I feel like they were told to make this, and it really does feel like they're in a no-win situation, because Battlefield 6 made its money already, and now they need to make microtransaction stuff for this full price game that everyone's still playing. And while most people have moved on or don't play as much because, as a game launches, the player count does go down, but Battlefield 6 on Steam still averages over 10,000 players, at least of time of me recording this. And sure, that's not huge, but we're not including the console numbers, and it's still really good. Having 10,000 players every day is still insanely good. Because Battlefield has never been a crazy big blockbuster game like everyone thinks it has been. Battlefield has always been a smaller game, even though EA wants us to believe that it's been a competition for Call of Duty. It hasn't been competition for Call of Duty since like Call of Duty 3. Ever since then, Call of Duty has destroyed Battlefield in pretty much every circumstance. And Battlefield 6 was the first one that kind of almost became competition, but that's mostly because Battlefield was peaking when Call of Duty is probably at its worst in a long time. So it really does seem unfortunate that these layoffs are happening, but it's one of those things where it's not unexpected because EA sometimes has unrealistic expectations on the Battlefield series, I feel like, and the amount of money that they're expecting is probably unreachable. It's just not feasible for them to actually do. Now, they do say this is a realignment or like a reorganization, and while that is good PR speak, I just simply don't believe them. I believe that this is just them downsizing because they don't want to pay people. Because I do think that the people that are working on this game can still make good content, and I hope for them to make good content, but hopefully this is not a recurring theme of EA laying people off that's working on Battlefield, because Battlefield 6 has been slowly but surely dying, because I don't believe it is, just because a lot of the players haven't been playing all the time. Like, sustaining a 700,000 player everyday concurrent is impossible. So I think they're actually doing fine. The problem is doing fine is not enough, and hopefully they can figure something out, because I still want Battlefield to exist, even though I am not a Battlefield player myself. And moving on to, unfortunately, another sad story, the Yakuza series creator Toshihiro Nagoshi made their own studio back in 2021 called Nagoshi Studio, and they were making a game called Gang of Dragons, which was announced during the Game Awards last year in May. And unfortunately, it has been announced that the studio's backing, which is NetEase, has cut off funding for this game, which is really unfortunate because this game basically looks like Yakuza without the Yakuza brand name. Now, a lot of people have a good faith in that brand name, and I think the Yakuza games are interesting and fun and all those good positive things. But unfortunately, like Bloomberg and Video Game Chronicles have said, that name alone can't be enough, and unfortunately it turns out Gang of Dragons as being very expensive to fund. Now, the game looks amazing. From what we saw at the Game Awards, the game looks amazing, and that's probably why it costs so much, because they're spending the money for, the mocap, the voice actors, the not even just voice actors, the actors as well, because one of the actors is Mao Dong Suk from the Train to Busan zombie movie in South Korea, which is a really good movie. So he's a good actor, and he's not a cheap actor as well. I'm assuming he cost a pretty penny. And so NetEase was told that they needed 7 billion South Korean won more, or $44.4 million to reach completion, and they basically said no. We are not doing more funding for this project. Now, we do know that Nagoshi is looking for additional funding for other places, but he has not been successful. 7 billion won is a lot of money, so it's not surprising that he is having difficulty to get funding for it. But I do think that his name or his history might be able to bring him over, at least to maybe be able to at least buy the game back from NetEase, because unfortunately NetEase owns the intellectual property of Gang of Dragons because they funded it, right? So they would need to basically buy it back from NetEase in order to work on the game, and in them just not completely shutting it down. And hopefully Nagoshi will be able to do something about this, because unfortunately NetEase just seems to be on the chopping block when it comes to anything. They've been axing so many things recently in the past couple years, and it looks like this is just next on the chopping block for them. Hopefully they can figure something out, because the game looks interesting and it looks cool. It looks like Yakuza without the limitations of being a Yakuza game. The Gang of Dragons game was interesting. I was super curious about how the game was going to play. It looked like it played basically like the Yakuza games, but in a different setting. Is kind of weird because obviously it's still taking place in a Asian style city with gang stuff. Obviously it's called Gang of Dragons, so like obviously they're playing off of the gangster life in an Asian city style. But from what we saw, it was a interesting evolution of that game genre, because I'm sure that there were some limitations that Sega was putting on the team for the Yakuza series. Even though when I say that, it's not like they haven't been able to not experiment with the Yakuza series, but there obviously was some limitations, or they'd still be there, or because they wanted to do something else in that same genre. Because if they wanted to do something completely different, they wouldn't have been making Gang of Dragon. And so hopefully Nagoshi finds a way to either fund it himself through private investment to buy it back from NetEase, or he can find an investor to buy it from NetEase and finish the funding. I'm curious if he can find another party to fund it, if NetEase is still going to be on the credits or in the publisher setting, because technically they've been funding it until now, since 2023, as we know, when they first really were talking about the game, kind of. But we do know they've been the main backing so far. So I'm curious if the game does come out, if NetEase is going to be in the opening credits or in the credits at all. I'm not sure how that goes. That's definitely going to be something interesting to see. That might be a either lawyer question or legal team question. But first, that thing that needs to happen is the game needs to actually be finished. So hopefully that comes out so I can figure out if they are in the credits or not. And finally, let's talk about Microsoft and Xbox. Seemingly forever, because Microsoft cannot not be in the news, it seems like. Recently, they announced Project Helix, which is going to be the next generation of Xbox, and it's going to be bridging the gap between console and PC gaming with their new AMD Magnus APU, which is also the same thing that's going to be in the next PlayStation, the PlayStation 6, most likely, from all the rumors that we have heard, because unfortunately nothing is super set in stone right now. We're still about a year or two away from these next consoles. But the biggest reason I wanted to talk about it is because of the price of this Project Helix, of being most likely $999 to $1,200 US in a possible 2027 launch, which is absolutely insane for the cost of an Xbox, for a console. Now, on the slight side of it, it is seemingly going to be a much beefier console than the Xbox Series X. It's going to be a much better console in general. It's going to get better frame rates. It's going to be faster. It's going to have more storage. It's going to have everything that you want a console to be. It's going to be better. But is it going to be that much more expensive better? And that's where I'm not entirely sure. And this is where I'm hoping that the new Xbox leadership is going to push Xbox again. Because if something like this is this expensive, it's going to need some killer games in the opening launch weekend or launch window. And when I say launch window, honestly, I said weekend. What I really mean is the launch 24 hours. When this console comes out, you need to have games that are going to sell this console. And honestly, best case scenario, a new Halo comes out as soon as this console comes out. But I highly doubt that, because 343 or whatever they're called now is a disaster, and I doubt they're going to be ready for that. So they need something to sell this console, because if the whole we're coming back to Xbox, we're going to go back to the gaming peak of Xbox, and all this talk that the new leadership has been saying for Xbox, it really needs to be back to Xbox exclusivity. And I say that as it hurts my consumer-focused brain, because obviously less people are going to be able to play these games if they're only on Xbox. But looking at the business side, Xbox needs to go back at being a brand. Xbox is basically not a brand other than Xbox Game Pass at this point. And honestly, while I hate to say it, I feel like Xbox Game Pass, don't take away games that are on the Game Pass, obviously, but the new games that Xbox is making needs to be, you have to buy them. You can't have them on Game Pass day one. A year later, maybe you put it on Game Pass, you know? 2 years later, whatever. Like, I'm sure there's something you can do eventually with the first party titles to be put on Game Pass a year later or something like that, kind of similar to like putting it on PC a year later. That Sony strategy's been for a little bit. But it's one of those things where there's no reason to buy games on an Xbox right now. And if your console is going to be costing over $1,000 potentially, you need to be able to play things on this console and it not leave. Even if it is going to be a premium console. And I do feel like they are trying to not lose as much money on the console themselves as previous generations, like the Switch 2 or the most likely the PlayStation 6 will be, where they're going to be selling at a loss, knowing that you're trying to get it in as many people's hands so you can sell the software. And you would think with Xbox Game Pass, that's what Xbox is going to do, but it seems that they're going the complete opposite of going into a premium console where it's going to be more expensive, but it's going to be better, and they're not going to be losing as much. They're still probably going to be losing on it, but not as much, especially with how crazy prices are for PC parts, especially if this is bridging the gap between console and PC. And we haven't even really talked about that, but unfortunately, we really don't know what they mean. And that is the part I am least trusting of Xbox, because Windows gaming has failed in basically every opportunity they've done it. Games for Windows Live sucked, and then thank God it's dead. The Windows 10 like store thing sucks. The Xbox app sucks on PC. So like I don't understand what they're going for. Like if you're going for Windows gaming, sure, but like make it so Windows gaming is actually good first. Maybe this is how they're going to try to make it, so they can have like a base thing to base everything off of, so they can have a good ground floor to get into it. Maybe that's the angle they're going for, similar to something like the Steam machines that Valve's doing. But I don't know, it feels really strange for this to be going in this direction when Xbox really needs some wins. And I don't know if this is going to be the win that Xbox needs for it to survive as a brand. Now, once again, the leadership has been very big on saying Xbox is going nowhere, because there's a lot of people worried that Xbox is going to die in the next couple of years. But they're very adamant on saying that we are here to stay. We are here. We're coming back to Xbox, in fact. So we're going to have to see if they truly mean that. And if that means selling $1,000 console and enough people buying it so they go back to making exclusive and good games. Because even though it's less consumer friendly, exclusives and competition make better video games for us. And even though I hate the term console war because people got way too into it and way too far, we need competition between the three console makers again. We need competition between Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft. And I don't think Sony and Microsoft are really realistically going to fight Nintendo, because Nintendo is just dominating so hard since the Wii that it doesn't really matter. They can put their head in the sand and it doesn't matter. So at least have competition between Microsoft and Sony. And that's what I'm hoping for. And we'll have to see with these new console generations. Though I don't think it's going to be happening in the next couple of years. I think 2027 is a unrealistic date because it's just too soon. Maybe for Xbox, though. For Xbox, it might be good enough because the Series X and stuff like that, first of all, I hate the naming. I really want this next Xbox to be just named Xbox something simple. Like, I'm just sad that they didn't do Xbox 720. Honestly, they should do Xbox 720. I really hope they do. But for PlayStation, I don't think the PlayStation 6 is coming out in the next 2 years, probably. The PlayStation 5, I think, has a very good lifespan ahead of it still. Which feels like we haven't even started this generation, really. So I don't think the next PlayStation is coming anytime soon. But the Xbox, they kind of need to go first in terms of this stuff, because it's just going to be really hard to fight against the PlayStation 6, especially if they are more expensive. Thank you everyone for watching today's video. I really appreciate it. If you would like to let me know what you guys think about this in the comments down below, I'd love to hear your opinions about it. You just heard all of mine. Love to hear yours. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We do these types of news style videos on Mondays. So come to the channel on Monday. Hit that notification bell if you would like to be notified. Hit the like button if you like this type of stuff. Hit the dislike button if you disliked it. I completely understand, and it lets me know. If you'd like to support me directly, please go to my Patreon at patreon.com/thetechnojelly. You join all of these nice people in the credits. and you get to vote on a once a month live stream that we have with other members, and we hang out and have a good time. If you would like to support me directly with a product, I have a affiliate code Techno Jelly. You get 10% off at poggers.shop, linked in the description. They do energy drink mixes, hydration mixes, and sleep aid mixes. The ones that I've tried are really good, and I've really enjoyed them. Really nice as well with the shakers as well. I've used the shakers as well. So if you like those products, once again, 10% off with my code TechnoJelly at checkout, linked in the description. If you'd like to follow me on other platforms, I have a Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, and Threads. Thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you in another video. Goodbye, everyone.